Good morning, good people. Welcome to another episode of Chase This Space. Chapter 4, we're at it once again. I want to cue in the next love of my life, my niece, someone who greatly changed my life a few years ago when she was born, almost a decade ago. I've been an aunt for 9 years now to one of the most amazing little girls, Nicole Simpuelana Africa Wilborn. Yeah, she's got quite a few names. We were excited. She's one of the best gifts I've ever received in my life. Apart from the fact that she pulled me out of a very dark place when she was conceived and when she was born, she's changed my life and my perspective on so many things. My sister and I never grew up with any kids in the house. It used to just be me and her for the most part. I have my baby sister Umbali, who we got to stay with when she was about, I guess, a few months old. But that's as long as we got to be around babies. And at the time I was 9 years old. Didn't know her much and didn't get to grow up with her, but we're still in contact today. And yes, she has her own little one, which I think is quite special. So I'm an aunt of two, not just one, and I'm an aunt of two. As for Nicole Simpiwe Wilborn, she came at a time in my life when I was in a very dark space, dealing with severe depression, not sure what the point and purpose of living was anymore, having lost my mom, and not sure in what direction I was going next in life. And I've mentioned my mom's passing in all of my chapters because it really was a very critical and fundamental part of my growth and of my life. You know, it shaped and influenced every part, really every part. And even though she died, her influence has just remained incredible and profound throughout all aspects of my life. So it's hard to mention any aspect or any part without mentioning my mom's part in it in some way. So yes, cue in my depression. I had been depressed for about a year and a half because really when you lose someone, the reality and the shock of it doesn't really hit you until later on. At least that was the case for me. The first few months to a year were bearable, and then the year after that became a blur. You really don't feel much, you don't want to do much, nothing matters, and the things you were afraid of, you kind of start learning to accept in a way. And I think that's when you've hit rock bottom so hard that there's nowhere else to go. Nothing matters in a literal and figurative sense. Nothing mattered at all. And I remember just laying in her bedroom one night, and I stood up, and I remember looking out the window and feeling like looking out here is not as scary as it used to be, you know. And that's when I realized in a very scary way that I was on the verge and I was okay with the concept of death, of dying, and maybe even of suicide. And here I was coming to accept that, hey, maybe this is not such a bad idea, you know, it could all end right now. Somehow, though, I was able to work my way through that dark point. And I've experienced a few other dark moments in my life, but nothing as dark as that. You know, losing my mom made everything else seem not so bad. And we'll get to those moments in other chapters. But it's been, yes, so along the line of this dealing with difficulties and dealing with rough times, my sister comes one day and tells me that she's pregnant. And I just remember shock. It was in that moment really where the excitement of being alive came to me again. The excitement of being a part of someone's life again, you know, because my sister had a relationship and she was happy, and I guess I'd also started experiencing a bit of a existential crisis because my sister didn't need me as much as she used to, and you know, she was now building her family with her then boyfriend and her then fiance, and here I was, this lone shoe looking for a partner, not even sure if I needed one, and here was my sister telling me that our lives were about to change for the better, and everything that I had come to understand about life in that moment completely changed. So it was like the curtains opening after being in the dark for so long. And you experience this warm light, you experience the rays and the sunshine, and there's a little hope again. so much happens in that moment where I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, you know what? We're so broke. We don't know what's going to be happening, and we don't know if we're going or coming. I just know that this is the best thing to happen to both of us right now in a very long time. It's a gift, and it comes from wherever it comes from, but we're going to take it. And throughout the whole pregnancy, I was so overprotective of my niece and my sister. Like, I remember we'd be walking down the streets in the taxis. I'd open all the doors, I'd carry all the packages, I'd do all the stuff. And I think when my sister was about 7 months old, she suffered an asthma attack, because my sister has always been asthmatic, but it was during the pregnancy that it gave me quite a scare. And when she had to be in hospital and put on breathing machines, and now I have to watch her steps and everything, it was really concerning, and it freaked me out. It really did, especially since our lift at the time wasn't working, so we had to walk up and down 11 flights of stairs every single day, going wherever we went. But it was also good exercise for her. I guess it's what helped keep her in shape. At the same time though, just remembering that she had breathing issues was something that we always worried about. Fortunately though, she survived that, and it was actually at 7 months that my dad found out that she was pregnant. My God-given dad had already known from the beginning, I guess, but we took our time in letting my biological dad know, because it was just a thing. We were both scared, and she was worried about his reaction, but he turned out to be quite happy. I know when he found out in the hospital room, in the cubicle, he wasn't sure. Well, it wasn't clear how he was feeling and how he was reacting. I just know that he probably was in shock, but the day he met my niece for the first time, 2 months after that, the man had fallen so in love, and I can absolutely resonate. And I remember the moment like it's yesterday. And the interesting thing was, when we do the checkups, the monthly checkups with the gynae and check that the baby was okay and everything, he mentioned a few weeks into my sister's pregnancy that no, but this child is going to be born on the 2nd of August. So we're like, you're playing. You don't know what he's saying. So fast forward to 9 months later, on the 1st of August, it was our birthday. My sister and I decided that we were going to go to Spur. And I think it may have been a birthday treat from her then fiance, I can't remember. But we were at Spur, my sister's walking around in heels. We're doing the whole thing, because my sister likes to dress up and have fun and enjoy herself. So we're in heels, we're in Spur, we walk around the mall, and then we get home. So when we get home, we get to spend time with one of our really good friends, Kelly. He came over to wish us happy birthday, and I guess just to celebrate. And then he Ubered home at about 11 p.m. And just after he left, we all went to bed. About an hour or two later, my sister starts screaming, and she's in pain, She's worried. Oh my gosh, what's happening? What's going on? And we figured, oh snap, she's in labor. But one thing we failed to acknowledge earlier was the fact that her water had broken. We didn't take it seriously until then. Like, oh snap, she really was in labor, because she's like, oh guys, I'm feeling wet. What's happening? Let me just put on a few panty liners. And she's like, no, we're still gonna go out. We're gonna have fun on my birthday. And that's what we did. We went to Spur, we chilled. It was great. Now she's in full-on labor. We requested a taxi. At the time there wasn't an Uber, so we had to call one of those local taxi drivers, and he came by. He was a bit of an asshole, really difficult. We tried to get into the emergency section, and he just was putting it off. My sister's in his car screaming, and I remember she did not want to be touched. I remember trying to put my hand on her shoulder, and she's like, don't you touch me. And I said, oh shit. So we get to Johannesburg Hospital, and we try to get into the emergency section, but we can't. We have to drive all the way around, and then eventually we get there. I now have to wait outside while Pumla and Nikki's father went into the delivery room together. They were gone for hours, and I'd left my phone, so they couldn't get a hold of me. I didn't know what was happening. He came out about 4 to 6 hours later and said, okay, the baby's finally here. And I just remember sitting in this hallway and crying, like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, we have a new human. And it was in that moment that I realized once we go back home, nothing is going to be the same ever again. So that feeling of having left the house, just it being the two of us, completely changed. I knew for a fact, okay, this little one's going to come into our lives and she's going to change everything. And so he said, well, you can go home, but we're going to pull her out now. I mean, they're going to move her from the delivery section up to the wards just to make sure she's okay for the night, just to make sure that she's okay and ready to be discharged. So I said, okay, cool. I'm going to go home. I went home. I took a nap. What felt like a nap, or I slept a little. And then I woke up. I remember prepping the house, like just trying to have everything prim and ready for this baby to come here. Eventually they got home. My sister had my niece in this little blanket and she was so pale and she had very straight hair. She had hair all up to her forehead. My sister looked like such a champ walking in with this baby in her hands. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm an aunt. Oh my gosh, my sister's a mom. A very big moment for me, that. And I remember her handing the baby to me and I was like, nah, fam. Hold that baby for a second. I'd never held a baby, and just the idea of having this fragile little human in my hands, as someone who was as inexperienced as I was, frightened me, it scared me. So I wasn't ready for the first, 30 minutes, and then eventually I held her, and shoo, life-changing moment, that holding a baby in your hands and seeing that this fragile, tiny soul has their whole life in your hands, literally, and you're there to hold her. You're trusted to keep this being, to keep this person. Completely changed my whole life on what trust and what relationships meant. And fast forward to later on, I grew so attached and obsessed with my niece. She became kind of like my my tester for everything. I had all these concepts and all these ideas and all these things I wanted to try, and it was so interesting to see just how willing little people are to learn from you and to pick up certain things and to pick up certain traits and to try and make you happy and impress you. And I was just like, oh my god, this little one is actually my mini me. Yes, she came through my sister and my sister did all the work, but essentially I felt like, oh my gosh, this is my little person. So I started experimenting with teaching her how to read, and we started out with phonics and letters and sounds, and she would pick things up very quickly. At the same time though, my sister and I had made a decision that we were just going to speak Zulu with her in the house so that we could make up for where we didn't have the opportunity to learn and speak isiZulu growing up, because my mom had been advised and said, and the lady who advised us suggested that no, you know what, get them to speak English from as early as possible. So that's where we are at now. There have been some pros and cons to that decision, but in any case, we had such a blast just giving her the fundamentals, learning how she learned, and bringing her into our worlds. You know, there's something that my mom used to say when we were younger, and it only clicked and registered when my niece was around. So anytime when my mom was frustrated or she was trying to make a point, or, you know, just in passing, and sometimes it used to feel like, oh gosh, not that again. She used to say, ladies, I'm not raising children, I'm raising young women of tomorrow. And it would always come out. So when she would say it, I'd always imagine her in like a queen's bow hat and like wearing gloves. It sounded so fancy, you know. But at the same time, when you've heard it ad nauseum, it feels like, oh gosh, here it is again. But in a way, I got to understand it because she would explain that, listen, I'm also doing this for the first time. I've, made mistakes. I'm a young mom. But at the same time, you're not my kids. You came through me into the world. And I'm just here to, I guess, serve as the conduit that allows you to go into the world and be yourselves, be what God put you here to be, basically. And I got that. Having thought of that, it kind of took the responsibility away from us to feel like we were supposed to be these parents, like to be these all-knowing, all-seeing, protective, like, oh, this is what you're supposed to be kind of parents, and be like, dude, listen, you join the party, great, but we're two young women still figuring ourselves out. We'll do it all together. Let's go. And that's more or less how we've approached our parenting. Of course, we've had to learn how to be strict. We've had to learn how to be strict. We've had to learn how to set rules and, I guess, be parents. At the same time, though, the wonderful thing about building relationships, even with children, is that you realize that from a very young age, they kind of have an idea of what they want. They kind of have an idea of who they are. So when you block them, you block the opportunity to get to know them as individuals. And when you start treating them like children, you block yourself from seeing beyond the fact that they are kids. You block yourself from seeing the fact that these are people just like you, who are figuring things out, who are trying to learn, who are navigating to the world based on the tools and the resources and whatever else they have. And the minute you start imposing these ideas of, oh, but you're just a child, they'll work within that. They'll work within the confines of that. But if you let the child be and you're like, okay, cool, this is a human just like me. Yes, they're younger, but they have an intelligence. They have a certain level of understanding. They have a certain level of comprehension. You let them be. And they surprise you along the way, which is what happened with my niece. So we just bring her along on our work trips, and sometimes it was because we had no choice. We would have to bring her to work. But it was great seeing how she just soaked everything in. She was willing to work. She was willing to learn. Not that, not that we were cracking the whip and being like, work, little girl, but just having her there. And it's something that we did naturally because it's something my mom did with us. She brought her with us. She brought us with her everywhere she went, which is how I started getting into voiceovers when I was young, and how I also did quite a few things based on what my mom was doing. When she was in the theater, when she had practice, when she had rehearsals in the theater, when she had voiceover gigs, whenever she had any kind of gig, really, she would bring us with. Exposing your children to that aspect and to that world opens their view on life and makes them want to be a part of what you're doing. It starts planting a seed of what's possible. That's what we did with Nikki. And Nikki's always been an easy child. She's just always been independent, very curious, very energetic, very affectionate and bubbly. So you don't want to now start taking that away from them. If anything, you give them enough room to express themselves, and you explore what's possible and what's not, while trying to chip away at the parts that don't and should not live with the child, that make you dislike the child or make you hate the child. I've been an aunt now for almost 9 years. It's been a great pleasure and a great joy for me. My niece and I have such a great relationship. I get to see her every day. I help tutor her. I've witnessed firsthand just amazing it is to have little people along with you on the journey. And maybe one day I'll have my own. Maybe I'd love to have my own one day and just add on to our family's legacy of adding really cool people to the list. People who are loving, caring, who do awesome things. Yes, so this is my little note of gratitude to Nicole for coming into our lives and for changing everything and for making things feel a lot more meaningful, for making things better, and for helping us become better humans just because she exists. Some of my biggest arguments and fights are with this little person. Thank you for having the courage to correct me when I'm wrong. Thank you for applauding me when I do something great. Thank you for being a good friend, a good teacher to me as well. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of your life every single day, for your laughter, for your smile, for your joy, for the great energy you bring into every space. I love you, my Nuna.